Having taken the long road to truth, we find that our world is nothing like what we were taught. Government-funded education system has indoctrinated the masses for generations to perceive the world the way they want us to perceive it, and not to see it for what it actually is. We are taught that we live on a spinning ball, hurtling through space at astronomical speeds, when nothing could be further from the truth. All it takes is observation and a clear mindset, and you can see that we live in a flat earth realm, flat and stationary, with the sky above us turning. We have been lied to on so many levels. Now we are going to expose a level that you may not have ever considered, but has actually been right in front of our eyes this whole time, just like flat Earth. Historical and geological timelines are completely fabricated. They added 1,000 years onto our historical timeline and tell us that mountains, canyons, gorges, volcanoes, etc. took millions of years to form, but nothing could be further from the truth. We are going to explore the possibilities of what this realm that we live in really is. And what exactly are these so-called geological features that they tell us are mountains, waterfalls, gorges, natural cave systems, etc. We are going to look at the world with new eyes. We can now finally see what has been in front of our faces this whole time. So sit back, open your mind, and welcome to When the Buildings Cried.
I would like to read several quotes. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla. My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. Earth is a realm. It is not a planet. It is not an object. Therefore, it has no edge. Earth would be more easily defined as a system environment. Earth is also a machine. It is a Tesla coil. The sun and moon are powered wirelessly with the electromagnetic field, the ether. This field also suspends the celestial spheres with electromagnetic levitation. Electromag levitation disproves gravity because the only force you need to counter is the electromagnetic force, not gravity. Though free to think and act, we are held together like the stars in the firmament with ties inseparable. Though These ties cannot be seen, but we can feel them. Each of us is only part of a whole. But can anyone doubt today that all the millions of individuals and all the innumerable types and characters constitute an entity, a unit? Though free to think and act, we are held together like the stars in the firmament, with ties inseparable. These ties cannot be seen, but we can feel them. I cut myself in the finger, and it pains me. This finger is part of me. We are all connected etherically and electromagnetically at the heart. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. The third of the 7 universal laws tells us that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The third and last of the immutable universal laws tells us that the whole universe is but a vibration. Science has confirmed that everything in the universe, including you, is pure energy vibrating at different frequencies. Everything that we experience with our 5 physical senses is conveyed through vibrations. The same applies to the mental realm. Your thoughts are vibrations. All your emotions are vibrations, where unconditional love, in the sense of love for another, is the highest and most subtle of the emotional vibrations, and hate is the densest and most base. You can learn to control your mental vibrations at will. It is important to understand that our universe is created out of duality, negative, positive, female, male, North Pole, South Pole, night, day, etc. The universe doesn't speak English, it speaks frequency, because we are spirits in a hologram. We are all part of a whole, oneness. You have the individuality, but we are all members of a single organism. It is important to understand our reality. Why is it important to understand our reality? Because if there is an agenda to mislead everyone in order to make them easy to control and lie to, if they think they're on a ball spinning through space and that they can land on Mars, then they will look for answers that are completely unfounded and inaccurate and frankly impossible. If you understand that you're living in a flat earth realm on a dielectric plane of inertia of a torus field with a dome firmament above, you would never be fooled or tricked into believing that you could be hit from something called outer space. You would understand that space and outer space do not exist. You would understand that there is a firmament dome above. You would understand, if you looked at and studied and researched your reality, that the stars above circle us, and you can prove that the earth does not spin and rotate. George Airy in the late 1700s tried to prove the rotation of the earth, and with a telescope and water he actually proved that the Earth is immovable and stationary, and that indeed it is the stars above that rotate above and around us. The North Pole here in the center never ever moves. It is the pole, the foundation of the celestial wheel, the celestial stars. The wheel in the sky keeps on turning above us, and the sun also rotates above us, and so does the moon. The sun takes 24 hours to go around, and it can only light so much of the Earth's surface at a time. That's why there is night and day, and it takes 24 hours for the Earth to circle above us, and that is what we call a day. And half of that 24 hours, it is lighting half of the surface of the Earth, while the other half is dark, because light has a limit. It's important to understand our reality, because if you understand that the stars above are nothing more than lights, and most of them are fixed, but 7 of them do move in a circle clockwise above us, and like the moon and sun above us, and they are just stars, lights. They're called fixed lights, fixed stars, but then the 7 that move are called wandering stars or lights. If you look through to the stars and the wandering lights with the telescope or a camera, you can zoom in on Mars and realize that it is translucent, and that you could never land on something that you can see through. This is light, not a terrestrial surface that you can land on. And it's very important to understand that, because when you understand that, you can never land on this light. They tell you that they can land on a terrestrial, that Mars is a terrestrial planet that you can land on, when it's just a light that you can actually see through, and it's translucent. So you could understand, when you understand your reality, you cannot be fooled and tricked and lied to so easily. If you understand you're in a flat earth realm. Heart is an anagram. Earth is an anagram for heart, because it is the middle realm. When you understand that there's a dome above and that space doesn't exist, you'll never fear of an asteroid belt that doesn't exist, or a Kuiper belt, or meteors or asteroids. These things can never and never have ever fallen down on us and can hit us. They don't exist. It's fear porn. Just like being an invasion from aliens is also fear porn and impossible and doesn't exist, because space doesn't exist. Landing on Mars doesn't exist. It's a wandering star, a light. It is a celestial light that is translucent. The Earth is a torus field, just like your body and everybody's body is a torus field. It is made out of, our body is made out of light, dense light. The Earth is flat and has a dome and firmament above. Imagine trying to build a building on a surface that wasn't flat, and imagine it was rotating and spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. Imagine trying to build a building on that. It's a good thing that our Earth realm is flat and immovable and stationary and not moving, and this way we can build buildings, railroad tracks. Trains cannot go up or down inclines. Thankfully, it is flat, and they have to make tunnels. Notice that in this map, the center here shows nothing but white snow and ice, while an older map, different map, shows 4 rivers and more land. The holographic nature is because of the electromagnetic fields. Notice how these magnets can create what looks like an ostrich here or an owl here. Everything, all form, everything comes from the torus field or the big apple. See the tree here? See an apple. All forms, all shapes, all sacred geometry, all Fibonacci ratios, all hypochondroid, everything, all in nature, everything here comes from the torus field. Because we are in a hologram. The earth, or the heart, flat earth plane of the torus field should be more up here in this area. This right here of the earth should be right here to be more accurate in this meme showing the flat earth, and then a human body with the torus field in line with its body and the earth's dielectric plane of inertia. Our body, our nature, our field, our form, our physical form is created and generated by the torus field of the heart. And the heart is the true intelligence, and its field magnetically and electrically dwarfs the brains. The soul est in the heart, in the fetus, initially, when coming into this world in the hologram. Courtesy Ken Wheeler and his research, we are able to see the nature of the electromagnetic field and ether that we normally would not be able to see. Notice the sacred geometrical pattern here in the field, because everything comes from the field or form of our body, the sacred geometry, Fibonacci ratios, everything comes from the torus field, as you can see here. Everything. See, notice the shape of an owl's face, and then notice the field here. And we are in a flat earth realm with a dome firmament above. Time lapse shows you the motion of the firmament above. Aries failure failed to prove the earth moves and rotates, but yet discovered that the wheel in the sky, indeed above us, is turning. Everything that we experience. Alright, I already read that. But let's go here to Ken Wheeler's work. Ken Wheeler, his research. Here he shows the nature and different motions of the torus field. Notice here the flat dielectric plane of inertia. Flat dome firmament. And then here he shows us, here you can see this coil here is wrapped with the conductive copper. This is fed here with electricity to generate a field. on this permanent ring magnet here, and there's a permanent ring magnet within the field here. You can see it, the attraction and repulsion. South, north, positive, negative, attraction and repulsion. Attractive magnetic fields, repulsive magnetic fields, electric current, electrons, light photons, and permanent magnetic fields in one experiment. Magnetic attraction, ferrocell and plane of light. Magnetic attraction, plane of light, courtesy Kinwheeler's research, were able to see these fields. And again, the Earth has it, and we have it. It's everything. It's very important to understand our reality. So let's continue our journey in understanding the nature of our reality. Here's Michael Tellinger showing what looks like a giant energy circuit, comparing the surface of the Earth to the motherboard on a computer. So I'm not the first one to bring this to your attention. People before me have also noticed that Mother Earth looks a lot like a motherboard. What we notice is temples or templates. What we notice is that the buildings are kind of set up like a motherboard on a computer. Obviously, we see melt damage here, but you can still see the motherboard nature of the surface of the Earth. It's important to understand the reality, our reality, the nature of our reality. It's very important. So why? Because this way, if we study and understand our reality, no one can lie to us. And when they do, we know when they're lying to us. Notice the nature of how these look like columns. And computer, Earth. And then active electricity. But we'll get to that. And another thing we notice is that here are the columns I just talked about. The buildings look like they're set up on a grid of a motherboard. And that looks kind of like a coil and a transformer there. And a motherboard on a computer. Mother Earth, motherboard. Look at that. That looks like a computer motherboard column that I was just showing. And again, look at the nature of motherboard Earth. Look at the motherboard Earth here. It appears that the surface of the Earth was set up, all the buildings set up like a motherboard. It appears there was an old world here that was destroyed. Perhaps a grid meltdown. We see evidence of a grid meltdown. Towers to the domes. We see evidence of an old world that existed before us, a highly advanced civilization that set up the buildings like a motherboard on a computer to harness free energy from the ether, from the electromagnetic field, from the atmosphere. This looks like a city, doesn't it? It certainly looks like a city, but this is a motherboard on a computer. Look, what does that look like? Twin Towers in New York City, but this is a motherboard on a computer. Look at that. Look at the building set up like a motherboard on a computer. What we learn from research is that the previous old world order, Tartarian Empire, was highly advanced and they were harnessing free energy. The pyramids that you see here are part of what we see on the motherboard grid system. All of the cities have the similar buildings. Everywhere all over the world are pyramids like this, not just Egypt. Notice the color of the red brick here. Notice the nature of that looks like a motherboard on a computer. See here? It looks like a Mother Earth is like a motherboard. Here we go again. Here we go again. Set up like a motherboard on a computer. Obviously destroyed and damaged, though. As you can see, the circle here has been moved around. The ground has been moved around. Notice that, because we'll get to this later, but notice that the ground, see how this has been moved? That's supposed to go like that, and then that's supposed to continue here like that. And it's over here. The entire ground has moved. Again, notice the entire ground has moved. That looks like a keyhole. Looks like a keyhole. Here's the pyramids and the nature of it, set up like a motherboard on a computer. Obviously very flat. And the horizon comes up to your eyes, meaning there's land and it's flat. If it was a ball, it would never come up to your eyes because it couldn't. Because if it was a ball, it would have to be curving down from your feet to create a ball. And can never come up to your eyes because it's a ball. Notice the ground has been damaged, moved, but you have these keyholes from the old world. Looking down the old world before everything was damaged by some type of X-factor event, we notice that it was set up, the buildings were set up like a computer board, a motherboard on a computer. Look at that. But we see these pyramids all over the world. We see the same buildings all over the world. For example, let me just show you right back here. Obviously, the similarities between motherboards of a computer and cities, but they had it set up like this already in the old world with the understanding of harnessing energy. This is from the old world. It's like an angel or something. This is from the old world. Harnessing the free energy and building it right into the architecture, as you can see here. It looked like we had a grid meltdown. See the meltdown here? See the melting here? It looks like it got hot, the ground got hot and started melting like this right here. Notice this is melting. Look at grid. See the melting? That's what it looks like happens, but we will get to that. What I want to show again real quick is notice these columns right here. And then I want you to come and notice the columns here. And then I want you to notice these columns right here. Now, notice these columns right here. What does that look like? The same idea. Columns, columns, columns. And you get this, look. You get this. This is an active building that is still active. As you can see, it's the exact same color and electricity. I'm going to show a video here of the noise that this thing makes, and you hear it all over the world. People talk about this noise, but it's the noise of electricity. You can see the same color here, the violet color, red shift, blue shift, you get violet, electricity. It's all vibration. Like Tesla was saying, everything is vibration. And again, all the cities all over the world are set up almost the same, down to the street names and everything, and they were all inherited like that from the old world. And notice the columns here, the buildings, and how it's set up. And notice the damage. We'll get to that. Notice the melting here and the damage here, the grid meltdown. Look at that. It looks like mud, but the buildings themselves actually started to melt and turn into liquid, what looks like this mud here. As you can see behind this, what's left of a building, a pocket of survival. Behind it, it looked originally all like that, but as you can see, it's been melted and turned into that, what looks like a rocky mountain, what they call that mountain these days. You see the melting around the pyramid. There was a grid meltdown. Notice all the flooding of the melting. Notice this right here. It's melting that way. See it? The building started melting that way. See the grid here? See the columns set up like a grid? Columns set up like a grid. Look at the melting here. It got very hot and it melted, as you can see everywhere as I show you these pictures. Look, even all the red brick here is completely melted and the color cooked out. The red carbon-14 is completely cooked out of these bricks here. And even the concrete molds that were put over the brick, as you can see here, have been, melted off with some X Factor event. See the melting here? See the motherboard nature here? See the melting here? It looks like, we're going to get to more of it later, but imagine, it looks like we've inherited a devastated place, and we'll get to it. We will get to it. So here's what it sounds like. Electricity. This is the sound of electricity. This is a live, active building. Notice the electricity around the top of the spire tower here, towers to the domes. Effect from the electricity here. Violet, red ship, blue ship, violet. So let's continue to explore our reality. As I spoke before, as we explored together before, we started to recognize the holographic nature of our reality, that we're spirits in a hologram, and the nature of how the old world predecessors before us seem to set up the buildings on a like a motherboard on a computer, if you will. The buildings are more like machines, part of a whole. Individually they're useless, but collectively together they form a circuit board grid whole, if you will. So after much needed research and so forth of our realm and reality, what I found and came to discover is that, besides the fact that we've been getting lied to from the mainstream science and so forth, the mainstream narrative, what I had discovered from my research is that, besides them lying, is that take everything that they've said and basically throw it away. And what I found out is before the new world, us, there was an old world, an entirely different type of world preceded us. It's a time thing. It's not a place thing. They would like you to believe that the new world is the West, and Christopher Columbus discovered the West, which is ridiculous. They're trying to basically hide the fact that there was a highly advanced civilization here, an old world order that preceded us, that was all over the world. There was no separation, no countries, no separation in languages, just no separation in hardly anything except for the type of vessels, the vast variety of sizes and types of vessels that were used by spirits like us who came into the hologram to experience the physical material world. And what you see on the right here is a building from the old world, completely different than a building here from on the left from the new world, our world. So we're the survivors of the survivor. What I came to find from research is some bad news. Is that before us was a highly advanced civilization. In fact, it was basically buildings like this set up all over the world. And like machines, if you can tell these things, the building here looks very jacked, as I like to say, kind of like, Transformers and so forth, kind of very electrical, because we are in an electrical world. So there was a highly advanced civilization here that preceded us, that did things completely different. You can tell by the style of the buildings. They're more like machines. Very creative, very beautiful, very detailed. Built perhaps by an entirely different size beings, by the size of some of the doors and windows that we see in these buildings. Perhaps their lifespans were much longer. And what it looks like is, what we find is there's buildings, these buildings, this highly advanced civilization before us was wiped out by some event. Something wiped them out, and we'll get to the evidence very shortly. Something wiped them out, and I'm going to get to some of the devastation here that we see. Oops. So what we start to find is evidence of an old world, highly advanced civilization being wiped out by some event. And I like to call it the X Factor event, because I don't really know what did it. So it's an X Factor. But we'll get to an idea. I do have an idea, though. And here is somebody from the old world, humanoid, buried in melted liquid hot building concrete, and then hardened again. And then here, what we see here is this sand. At one point during the X Factor event, the buildings, the grid melted. It looks like there was a grid meltdown to the point that the ground was flowing in like hot lava, except it was the buildings that had melted from the grid and the heat, and perhaps even some frequency vibrations from what is this realm, which is a Tesla coil, which, by the way, we built this Tesla coil. Sort of like a virtual reality for souls to experience light, etc. Our bodies are made of dense light. At one point during the X Factor event, the grid meltdown, the buildings were melted and flowing and viscous like hot lava. See the sand here? When also, and again, I'll get to what I think might have happened. But look what happened to the buildings. This was all hot, flowing like lava, but it's liquid building, liquid red brick and concrete. Total meltdown. These are all buildings from the old world. See the arch here, brick lines. And what do we see here? Viscous. It was hot. It was very, very hot. And it was liquid. It became viscous and started to flow and become fluid and viscous. And then something else happened. It cooled off extremely fast, to the point it hardened so we could see these viscous holes. Again, when it started to become hot and fluid, it began to separate and form these holes. It was transforming from a solid state into a liquid state. And then again, something cooled it off very fast, to the point it hardened back to a solid state again quite fast. And we'll get to that. I have evidence of that. And as we look down from the hot air balloon view, which is the only thing that can loiter over a flat plane, satellites don't exist. We'll get to a lot of things that don't exist. And again, what do we see here? Brick lines and buildings, melting hot, top of a building here, and then what do we see here? What looks like a hot lava, flowing hot like lava, and it is all hardened back again. Notice what we see is complete devastation. In fact, it looks like it's still hot from the X Factor event. Again, these are all buildings that have been damaged by some event. What do we see here? Tops of buildings, super flat. Mesa tabletop, tops of buildings, flat, because it is flat. Whoops. These are all pancaked brick lines, and then these are A-frames. It looks like the heat's coming up here, but we will get to that. Everywhere, buildings damaged, melted brick lines. And then let's look at the building here, melted completely. See the black scorch marks, see the dripping. Apparently still hot. This looks like a building melted here, and then it has a big hot, still hot from the event. Again, look at that. It looks like it's flowing away from the building from it being hot, viscous fluid and melting. And then there's more brick lines, the top of a building dome. What type of event could have melted buildings like this? As you can see here, look at the melting, and these were all buildings here. You can see the arches, the brick lines, the domes, the towers. You can see that it's been flooded in its own liquid fluid. And then this was all very, very hot and liquid like lava. And then when it cooled off real fast, it was so thoroughly cooked into fine grains of sand is what you get. But what happened? All I see, when I look around, is devastation. Let me show you the world in my eyes. I see nothing but devastation. Let me give you my theory on the X Factor event. My theory is that we're in a flat. Well, this is not theory right here. Let me set the table here first for us here for dinner, if you will. Again, we're in a Tesla coil. Okay. Above is the stars, and you have a sun and a moon. But in my view, possibly a theory, and this is why we call it an X Factor event, because I really don't know. But perhaps in the old world, before this X Factor event, there were two suns. Perhaps this moon here was a sun, or it was a moon and it just didn't have this much damage before, and now it's damaged. But in my view, there were two suns before, and this was a sun, but now it's our moon. And what you see is just a lot of electrical discharge, just a lot of damage. I mean, major. Look at the electrical discharge. It just looks like a lot of damage. That has to be explained. Just like I'll get to all that. Just like this has to be explained here. There's a big, huge rift. The Great Rift, or the rift is what, in the dome here. A crack in the dome. And it's not the Milky Way galaxy, because we're in a flat Earth realm. And it's a dome firmament above that all these lights, all these stars are attached to the dome through magnetic levitation. Now here, it looks like there's a major crack in the dome. And then you have damage to one of the suns. And then, excuse me, you have just damage everywhere you look. You look up, there's damage in the dome. You look at the moon, it's got hot mark damages, electrical discharge, scorch marks all over the surface of it. And then you look around and you see what are you see mountains everywhere, which are actually melted buildings from the old world that have been melted and heat damaged by some type of X-factor event that wiped out most of these beings in the old world. We're talking about not billions of beings, not trillions. We're talking upward above quadrillions of beings living here in harmony by what the research from what I've seen. So it looks like there were two suns, and it looks in my view that something intentionally was taken over the plane here, the parasites, and we'll get to all that. And it looks like there was an electrical discharge from this, which was a sun, from the ground to the dome, or to the dome and to the ground. Vice versa, don't know. But it looks like there was a major grid meltdown, and we see damage on the dome. We see a rift, a crack, and then we see damage on the moon here, which could have been a sun. And then we see damage everywhere we look when we see mountains, which used to be beautiful Tatarian buildings. So we see damage everywhere. Let me get back here. I know I was showing the damage here. This was all liquid hot, and when you have two suns, right? And one of the suns, like right here, gets shorted out. Initially, there is a huge explosion and huge amount of heat. Everything was super hot, thousands and thousands of degrees that melt red brick and Tatarian concrete to the point that it looks like they're getting melted like ice cream into what you call mountains today. And you get an initial heat that just is so hot, but again, it dissipates. It goes away. Not only that, you have, instead of two suns, one of the suns is now malfunctioned. So instead of two suns, now you only have one sun operating, putting out the light and heat. And again, this moon here is measurably puts out a colder temperature now. When measured out of the moonlight shade, the moonlight measures colder than the moon shade. Now it's putting out a malfunction, degrading frequency, perhaps putting on us, our bodies, our vessels on a death cycle and reducing our age. Either way, it looks like the buildings were very hot and they were melting, and then something cooled off very fast, because instead of two suns, now you only have one sun. This one's malfunctioned. There were two suns. Now you only have half the energy going out, half the heat. So what happened is when the buildings were melting and crying, they were dripping, 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 and boom, they hardened instantly in midair. All of a sudden, because of this lack of energy, because of this one sun instead of two suns. And perhaps this is why we also got a flood after the fact, because after all, everywhere you look, Everywhere you look on our flat Earth plane, it was buildings, and they've been melted and then flooded. Melted and then flooded. All the continents are tops of buildings. That's right, tops of buildings. And you can see how the buildings have melted away, but where it didn't, you can see where it's sharp and still steep. Everywhere the natural ground floor, if you will, ground zero, the natural ground floor is the bottom of the ocean. As you can see, the natural ground floor is the bottom of the ocean. As you can see, you have major damage. Major damage. And it's been flooded. Flooded in. Flooded in. Everywhere has been flooded. And the toppest parts of the building remain above water, because it's been flooded. And then here it looks what looks like a Lichtenstein effect, but it's all melted buildings, damaged, scorched, melted, hot, flowing like lava. And again, what I think could have happened is when you have all this moisture in the air that is no longer supported, you have all this gas vapor in the atmosphere, and now you have only one sun operating. Well, guess what's going to happen? There's not enough energy now to support all that moisture into a gas vapor, and it will liquefy and turn from a gas vapor state into a liquid state, cool and condense and rain and flood. Heck, it could have rained for 40 days straight and nights for all we know. But everywhere we look, when we do the research, all we find is damage and devastation. I mean, this looks like this part of the building was blown that way. The tops of the building blown that way. And everywhere you look, we see red brick buildings completely melted and flowing and getting blown, the color carbon-14 blown into this area here, and it's really hot white here where the color's been cooked out. It's all melted buildings, tops of buildings. And you can see how you can go down into the regular, excuse me, the regular ground, the regular floor. Ground zero is I guess it's not. I'll have to go to the next. It's down here. See you down here? This is the actual bottom of that's actually the ground. Everything else is buildings, and we'll get to that. And this right here, looking from the satellite view, scorched, burnt, melted buildings everywhere you look. Here you can see brick lines, buildings floating. Excuse me, it was fluid, liquid melting, running, flowing, hot like lava. You can see it, liquid flowing everywhere. You can see the way, which directions the buildings are flowing over. You can see how the buildings were flowing that way and out, covering the ground, flowing out, covering the ground. You can see how it's flowing out. From the melting, the buildings were melting and flowing from the X Factor event, spreading out, melted. Everywhere you look, devastation, melted buildings, messed up by some X Factor event. Brick lines, the entire buildings turned into mud, dirt. It's like liquefaction. It's like the grid meltdown was so hot, maybe it was putting out a frequency that assisted in altering the states from a solid into a liquid. Because, I mean, you got windows here, top of the dome, arches, columns, brick lines, everywhere you look here. I mean, this is all was buildings and brick lines and arches and buildings. And look what happened to them. They're all just flowing, like melted, like ice cream. And then look at all the entire flat earth plane, the dielectric plane of inertia. The grid has been melted. Look at all the buildings melted. Islands are tops of buildings. And again, you see more buildings melted. Everywhere you look, damage, melted buildings, and then flooded. And look at this older map. What do you see? All over here, nothing but melted buildings. And then look at the top. Look at the top here. Islands are the tops of melted buildings. Look, that's shallow in here because that's the top of a building. But the water's coming over it. It's shallower there. Tops of buildings sticking up. Buildings that have been melted and flooded, and then tops of them sticking up still. Look at that. Tops of the buildings sticking up. But you look and you can see how high these buildings are and how deep it is down to the bottom of the ocean floor where the real ground level is. It's all melted buildings. Everywhere we look, melted buildings. Melted buildings. Look at the flowing here when it was viscous. Look at the building here. Look at the melting. This was a grid meltdown. You can see the melting. You can see the waves of the melting. You can see the damage. You can see the waves of the melting. It's quite incredible. The evidence is right in our face that an old world order, excuse me, a highly advanced civilization preceded us. And within, I would say, 500 to 1,000 years ago, something happened. Maybe, and what do we see here? Melted buildings here, flowing down this way. See it? Flowing that way. Melting. Look at the building melted and it starts to flow. All this is smooth. See how this is flowing away from the building? Flowing away from the other building there. Again, look, it's all melted. And again, more evidence of the old world being flooded, damaged. What do we see here? Buildings. Everywhere, buildings. Melted, flooded. More evidence. Here they are, flooded. Look, buildings melted. Look at the melting here. That's all melted from the grid and then flooded. And then more evidence of an old world civilization in the past, highly advanced. Flooded. Brick lines. Highly advanced, melted out by and destroyed by some X-factor event. Look at all the brick lines. Look at the arches. Look at the cracks. All flooded. Buried, but not forgotten by us. Look at the melted red brick here, melting. All caves are melted buildings. And here on the left, melted buildings. Brick lines right there. Melted building, flooded. Huge, huge melted buildings. I think this is from One Breath Around the World. And the dude's swimming, and there's melted buildings everywhere. Evidence of a past civilization. And then in the Wikipedia, when you look up, they tell you that there's a dome at 13,000 feet. Not Wikipedia, the encyclopedia. We try to hide that fact. And then what do we see here? Melted buildings, Antarctica, and it looks like a dome. It looks like a dome. And you can see it. I can see the dome myself at night. Again here, old world civilization, highly advanced, melted, destroyed by an X Factor event, and then flooded, but not forgotten. We're the survivors of the survivors. Evidence of buildings in Antarctica. Everywhere you look. Look, tops of buildings. Buildings flooded. Buildings flooded. Buildings melted. If they're not flooded, well, they're all melted even if they are flooded. And again, look, you can see the buildings. You can see the tops of the buildings that have been melted into that mush still remain above the flood, where it got flooded. As you can see here, the water has come in here and flooded this. Only this remains above the flood. This was all brick lines, and it's all melted. Everywhere you look, it's smooth and melted. Every little dot here are tops of buildings. These are all tops of buildings flooded. All these little tiny dots, tops of buildings flooded. Tops of buildings flooded. Melted and then flooded. And again, look, more evidence. And this is what we get. This is how the old world did the floors a lot. These little individual tiles, decorating, creating, co-creating, in harmony, like they had all the time in the world. And it was just important to deck out. Everything they touched had to be completely decked out. That's the style of the old world. Highly advanced civilization. Everything they did was completely creative. Everything. And again, what do we see here? On the right and left, expanded red brick and concrete from the X Factor event. And then flooded. And again, look, brick lines melted, flooding, flowing. Buildings turned into mud, dirt. And then what do we see here? Another victim from the X Factor event. This is all that's left of the skull of a person that got crystallized from the X Factor event from the old world. And this is all that's left of a building during the X Factor event. All this was flowing hot like lava. It surrounded and flooded this building here. It surrounded it. You can see the top of it here, flooded, submerged in its own heat. And this is all that's left of red brick. You can see the windows, the arches. This is all that's left. This was all flowing hot like lava. And then, like I said, you only have one sun now, so you only have half the power now. And it cools and condenses very fast into sand. And then, again, what do we have here? Another victim. Looks like a spine, eyes, nose, nasal cavities, skull. You can even looks like hair. But again, buried in liquid, hot, melted building and turned back into concrete. Because that's what it is. Everything here, and there's a hand here. A victim of the X Factor event. Teeth here, covered and buried in hot liquid, melted red brick buildings, and then hardened again. And then again you have another victim, evidence, skull, teeth, completely buried, possibly buried alive, and then it was hot, viscous, burned them up like lava, buried them, and then hardened back up like concrete again. Because that's what it is. It's concrete. And look, that's hard as a rock. It's concrete. and not happy about getting covered in hot concrete and then turned back into rock. That's hard as a rock now, because that's what it was. And then here, somebody getting in pain, looking down, the hand here in pain down on the ground, hot flowing lava from melted buildings, and then hardening and flowing over these, and then hardening like a rock again. Here, horse covered in hot liquid building that's all red melted brick, flowing over this horse here. See more red brick, and it's hard as a rock now, because that's what it is, concrete. But the building became so hot from the grid meltdown that it flowed over this horse and fried it, burned up all its flesh, and then hardened like a rock. And then more victims of the X Factor event, all buried, drowned, flooded by this hot liquid melted building, hot like lava. Here they are, victims, more victims of the X Factor event. You see what used to be red brick back here. All this was hot flowing. Here you have gravel here because it was churning brick and concrete into tiny pieces of rock from the heat and flowing and being cooked in this hot liquid red melted building lava. Again, you have this, what's left. Everything else is melted red brick, flowing like concrete, flowing like lava. Some of the bone left. Some of the bone left here. And you can see the holes where it's viscous, coming apart, separation, flowing, and then hardened like a rock. Concrete, because that's what it is. Another victim. Another horse victim. Buried in liquid melted building. Flooded, buried. Here is a whole room of humanoid beings from the old world, completely buried in hot liquid melted building. Here, this used to be red brick, and they're inside here, and it's all liquid building melted, and they got fried and cooked. Same with this one. And again, you can see how this got all hot. You got your red brick here, it's going block. The whole area is completely flooded by hot liquid melted building, and they were flooded and killed with it. And again here, more victims of the lava flow of red hot brick melted buildings. And again, they all seem to have their hands tied here. Again, that's not a good way to go, to be forced to not be able to run from the hot liquid building and to get flooded from the pain. And somebody comes along and walks on it after it cools off and condenses into that. No longer is it hot lava. And again, we see damage everywhere. This was all red brick, and it's all been melted and damaged here. Again, what do we see here? Scorch marks, melting, and damage. What do we see here? Completely melted. Completely melted and flowing that way. The X Factor event. Evidence of an X Factor event. Melting a building right there. And then more damage, scorched marks. This is from the old world, inherited from the Tatarian, the old world. Most everything here was inherited. We inherited everything. So when they came over here and said Christopher Columbus came over here and discovered everything, wrong. Didn't happen. All these buildings were already here. All these railroads were already here. Everything was already here. Nobody built everything, and we'll get to that. But look at the damage here. You'll notice the old world columns here, and looking like a motherboard on a computer grid. Again, you see pyramids all over the world. You see them all over the world because it was a grid. And you see here all liquid hot, melted red brick. It's all buried and it was all flooding. This was all hot like lava at one point before it cooled and condensed. And it was cooked into fine grains of sand, except for the bigger parts of the brick here. And again, what do we see here? You see a building, and then you see damage like this on the side of it. It's melting and expanding from the grid heat meltdown. Nobody came along and carved this out of a mountain. This is not a mountain. Mountains are melted buildings. And again, I'm showing you that this is a building and this is it melting from the grid meltdown, and it looks like a mountain there, but it's not. Mountains don't exist except for the buildings that got melted, and you think they're mountains. It's just melted buildings. Again, right here is the building being melted from the grid, and it's expanding and marshmallowing and swelling out like a balloon, like somebody blowing up a balloon, like a balloon rock. And it's melting hot, and it looks like a mountain now. So only part of this building was damaged, but sometimes the entire building gets damaged and it looks like that, and that's all you get. It looks like that, a rocky mountain, because that's all that's left. But it was a building. And again, here I want to continue to expand on the evidence here of, you have buildings here, you see scorch marks. Look at the damage. You have red brick, and then they spread the concrete finish over the brick to give it an upgraded, updated, new look. Here you have scorch marks, you have melting, you have heat, you have the side of the building here expanding out, and it looks like a rocky mountain now, because that's how mountains were formed. It didn't, in this case, this didn't have enough heat to turn the whole building into that. Are you getting it yet? Are you seeing where mountains really came from? Are you seeing that all mountains that look like that, that's a mountain that looks like a mountain. It was first a building, and it got heat damaged into a mountain. There it is. It's a building. Nobody came along and carved a building into a mountain here. Okay, that's ridiculous. But that's what everybody says, because they just haven't done enough research yet. Advanced research. But what I have found is nobody came along. This was not a rocky mountain. Nobody came along and built a building around this. This is a huge building, and it has been damaged, and it looks like a rocky mountain now. Look what happened to the red brick here. This was all red brick. This was red brick. This was red brick, and now that looks like a rocky mountain, and now that looks heat damaged and scorched, and looks like stone now. But it was all red brick. And again, you see that? See all the heat damage? That's all damage from the X Factor event. It looks like a rocky mountain there. The bottom has swollen up and out like a mountain. It looks like a mountain there. And again, right here, it looks like a mountain there. But the building from the bottom, the grid got hot, and it expanded, melted out, balloon rocked the bricks, and it looks like a mountain now. But it's just melted buildings. And again, check out this incredible evidence here. Again, you have these steps, and around the steps, it has heat damage and swollen out. And look, Look at this damage here. See, it's dripping and expanding and churning and swelling from heat. And it looks like a rocky mountain now. Look, that was hot and expanded and churned from heat. Nobody came and carved a building out of this little mountain here. It's a building that's been heat damaged, but most buildings, the whole thing gets turned into this rocky look. The whole thing, and that's how you get a mountain. That's what I found in the advanced research. And here, the skull at the top, buried in liquid, melted hot lava, concrete. That's all concrete. Look at it. And again, everywhere you look, devastated buildings, damaged. Look at the arches here. It goes on and on. And this is me in Beulah, Colorado, standing on melted building. And what I found here in this, what was flowing hot melted building, what used to be red bricks, but they call them volcano rocks now. You can see the holes. It was viscous, and it looked like what they call a volcano rock, but there's no volcanoes anywhere around here. It's all melted buildings. And again, none of this is from volcanoes. It's from an X Factor event that melted buildings. Behind me and right here, melted buildings. And here I am doing a home inspection, and I come down into the basement and I find this. I find the old foundation from the old world Tartarian Empire. The red brick had melted and expanded in this way, and they just built around it. The New World Order came along and just built around this. See how it melted down, out, and out? See how it was viscous and how it was hot and expanding? See the holes here from separating and coming apart? See it flowing this way? See it flowing this way into the room? And here's a different house where the red brick, the ground was getting hot, the red was melting, and it was squeezing out the mortar from in between the bricks, down and out from the heat. We call it mortar snot because it's dripping like snot from the heat, from the X Factor event. Here it is again. Melted red bricks starting to melt. And again, here's a house in downtown Pueblo. Old downtown area. Notice the ground. Notice how the ground was completely hot from the ground in here. Look what it did to the side of the building here. The house here I inspected. Look what it did to the sidewalk here. Look at all the damage, and all the heat came from the bottom. And let's look at the inside from underneath. What happened to the red brick? What do we see here? When I'm inspecting these homes, I'm going, what is going on here? We got red brick, and then we have it damaged, heat damaged. This all used to be red brick. All this was here from the old world. We just came along probably between 500 and 1,000 years ago and built on, around and over all this stuff. Of course, this was already here. This is red brick here, and then it's damaged red brick here, melted from a grid melt down from the bottom, and all the floors in this house, all the wood is bowed and warped and heat damaged. Not a single level floor. Look what happened to the red brick here on the left. That was all red brick, like the right. Everything should look like beautiful red brick. Everywhere you look, beautiful red brick. It should look like beautiful red brick. And all the wood is heat damaged and bowed and warped. Every floor is bowed and warped. In this house I inspected, everywhere there was red brick, and then it got turned into block and stone, like you see here. And all the wood in the house Didn't catch fire from the heat coming from the bottom, but it did heat damage and warped all the wood. All the floors are completely bowed and warped and unlevel. Look what happened to the red brick of this house that I personally inspected. And this is how I figured out that the red brick was being cooked into this. Because all these houses I'm inspecting, they're thinking that it's built like this with stone, not realizing that it's damaged. And right here, this is, I don't know why, but somebody put a piece of wood in here and it looks like a red brick, and it's not. Because I was right there. I grabbed it. They put that in there, I guess. I guess the other one just fell out or something. But that was all red brick. See how it expanded and started balloon rocking and marshmallowing and trying to form little blocks here and separating. Look what happened to the red brick. I personally inspected this house. I've been a home inspector for over almost 5 years now. Going on 5 years. Look what happened to all the red brick here. So it's my duty to report this, or I'd be kind of negligent. But this is how I discovered that red brick was being melted by some type of grid X-Factor event. There's a highly advanced civilization here before us. And this is all that's left of the red brick. The rest of it's been cooked into that crap. Expanded around, the old wood is all damaged. I've seen insane heat damage from some type of grid X-Factor event meltdown. Insane. Insane heat damage. Everywhere you look. So let's take a look at what might some of the sizes have been by the sizes of the doors and the windows built by some of these buildings that were built by the beings in the old world. As you see here, this is not a Tatarian, but he has the body size of what was some of these Tatarians. You can't see the whole door here, but you can here. Look at the short person here, and then look at the door here. So you have, he's this high, and the door goes up to here. Here's the doorway. Somebody normally walking up about this high would grab a handle up here. He can't even touch it. Or up here. He can't even hardly touch it. Again, look at the doorway, and you can imagine some of the sizes of some of these beings. And again, it looks like, here's another person our size. Again, in my view, they had all sizes, all different shapes of vessels, different, we'll get to it, but in my view, you'll see a particular door size at this height here, and then you'll see our size, and the majority of them were this size, and then a lot of them were our size, and then you had bigger ones and so forth, but the majority of them were probably, in my view, you had this size, and then probably the 10-footers, obviously maybe for this size door here, because that's pretty big, but that's pretty big. I mean, that's huge. And again, look, big dude, small dude. Again, everywhere we look at the old world that we inherited, everything that we look at shows different sized beings. Here's this guy, his head comes up to this right down here, and look at how high the doorway goes. And again, how big do you gotta be to open this door? I mean, look, that's steel, you know. The handle would be up here, you'd grab it, walk in, being this high, I don't want to hit your head. But that's the size of these beings. Look at the doorway. And again, look how tall she is here. She's enormous. We're walking down here, and she can't even go inside these. She's too tall. They have these rooms for the smaller people and the bigger people combined. You'll see that in the way they built. They had rooms for different sized beings built into these buildings. And look at this door here. Because you'll see different sized doorways, different windows, all kinds of different stuff and rooms for different sizes of people. Look at this door. How big it is. Imagine trying to move that door. Of course, maybe they had a button. Boom. They were highly advanced. They just push a button. Boom. But, or you could just be a big giant and open it real easy. Because it was built for you. Again, look at the size of the door here. Look at the size of the ceilings in this place. And again, not a Tatarian, but residual body size from the old world. Tatarian, old world order body size. And again, look, they can't even touch the railings. Look, they can't touch the railings. And look at these guns. They can't even hold them hardly. And again, different size beings, different beings with different, the animals and the humans were not separated yet. You had what looks to me like beings with animal bodies and human heads, and the reverse, humanoid bodies with all different kinds of animal heads. And they even depict them a lot with wings. Some of these people might have had wings. Some of these beings from the old world might have had wings. And here, another depiction of a different animal face or head on a humanoid body. And it's wings. Look, wings, tail. I mean, this thing's got wings. And then look, what do we see here? Depiction, elephant head, bird head, dog head. I mean, I don't know if that's a dog head. Animal head, dog head, not very looking friendly head. I mean, damn. At all. Look. I mean, this being here, it's got the animal body and a really, really human-looking face, nostril there, but whatever. Bird head, again, that looks like you know, another just another different head, animal head on a humanoid body. And again, not looking very friendly. What does that look like? Vampire teeth. I don't know. And again, look at this dude. Vampire teeth. Size of those eyes, but a human body. Humanoid body. And another depiction of a being from the old world. Looks like they communicated between worlds with ease, possibly, back in the day before this disaster of the X Factor event, this cataclysm that perhaps sealed us from other worlds and communications with other beings. And another depiction of a dog-headed looking humanoid. And you got your regular looking humans. And then you got some dudes with some giraffe looking, I mean, whatever type of freaking head with some human body, but still has the fur, animal fur. But it looks like some type of animal head here. Perhaps, I don't even know what to call it. And again, what do we have here? Humanoid body. Humanoid body. Reptilian head. Some dude in this. Female reptilian, I guess. It's got breasts. It looks like, and this looks like it ate a human. But it's symbolic. But again, this is melted, scorched. It's a statue from the old world. And again, another statue from the old world. He's got hoofs, but somewhat, but very human. Human neck and head, but obviously it's an animal looking, but human looking too. Again, in the old world, in this highly advanced civilization, there were all different kinds of looking beings. You have humans, human heads, human torsos mixed with animal bodies, even fish. So there was some water. Obviously before the flood as well, obviously. And here we are, depiction that looks like a dog head, except he's got flippers for feet. Same with this thing. Looks like a mermaid. And it can just hold its own fishtail body in its hands. And again, this is armor for a dog-headed humanoid. And there's a dog-headed humanoid. Werewolves? Are you kidding me? They had dog-headed humanoids. And this dude's walking around with some type of, And again, here we go again. Yeah, the caduceus, I know that. But again, it doesn't mean it was a bad thing. Could have got inverted, but look, humanoids with animal heads. And here we go, dog heads, and they're toting around these animals on their friggin' heads. Human bodies, wearing clothes. It's got a dog head, wearing clothes. Look at the clothes. Obviously, part of the statue broke. Again, that's not looking very friendly there. At all. I don't know. If I saw this guy, he'd look like a werewolf. He'd be kind of scary looking. I mean, look at the dog head, but look at the human hand and human body. And then obviously, look at the scorch and the damage and the melting and the concrete as well. But again, it looks like this highly advanced civilization had all kinds of different size beings, all different kinds of animals with different bodies and mixed up with humans, torsos, fish, animals, you name it. It's all fair game. Just any vessel will do. If you're a spirit coming in to the hologram and your torus field manifests your body, your form, densifies it, maintains it. You could pretty much make anything if you had the codes and the frequencies you could mix and match any type of shape you wanted, really, if you just had the codes. That's all you needed. And again, here we go. Dog-headed human body. And then here, not even a dog head. I mean, this is almost a human head. It's got the human ears and everything, except, boom, the mouth just maintains that, the dog. And here we go, human body. And a dog head here. Dog head. Looks like a dog head. And these are statues here. Concrete molds. Statues. And again, look at this. This is an actual armor that like knights wear, except this one's for a dog-headed knight. Here we go. Dog head, human body. And again, it's my view that we've been invaded by etheric parasites that can't do a single thing here unless they get somebody in the physical world to do it for them. So they trick and infest humans and perhaps the dogs, or dogs backwards is the gods. The gods concept most likely came from the dog-headed humanoids that were infested by these etheric parasites that needed these guys and perhaps other humans as well to do things in the physical world to create a world where there's suffering. They feed on the negative energy of suffering. When you look at this world, there's all this unnecessary starvation where food gets thrown away because they don't have money. And it's all made up suffering. It's all generated unnecessarily. Why? To provide food to the etheric parasites. And they have to trick beings in the physical world to do their bidding to create the world they need so they can eat. And if they don't create a hell on earth, they starve and they can't eat. So that's an easy way to defeat them then. We create a world of love with zero misery that starves them out of their food. Zero fear, zero misery, zero suffering. They starve and die. And then there's a world that is truly free again from the parasites that generate negative thoughts in our heads to divide it, to constantly divide and conquer this world. And they're not nice. They are not nice. They hate us. The parasites have to infest other beings to control us and to create the hell on earth so they can eat. What do you see here? You see a different human head on almost every single one of these, and they're all human bodies. I'm sorry, animal heads. I meant to say animal heads. There's a different there's a different animal head on every one of these things, but they're human, all human bodies, but short, small, midget-looking bodies, dwarf, perhaps style bodies. But look at this one's rabbit head. Is that ears or horns? It doesn't matter, but there's all different kinds of animal heads on humanoid style bodies, even if they're smaller bodies, some bigger. And again, in my view, not only were there all those different beings I just showed, but beings with 4 arms on each side. I would love that, to have that. Are you kidding me? So you got all different kinds of beings here. You know, all different kinds of vessels were being used here at one point. And it's in my view that there was an agenda to wipe out all the giants, all the different looking humanoids, and to trick us into just one vulnerable vessel, a human vessel, completely vulnerable to the weather and to everything outside, completely vulnerable to the point of where, you know, you need breath, which is spirit, to survive here. It's the quickest thing that you could die from. We're completely vulnerable where we need water. 3 days without water is rough. 3 weeks without food is rough. You could die. We're very, very vulnerable to the I don't know why I can't think of it right now. I apologize. But to the environment around us, if you will. Our bodies, our skin. It's my view that all the insects and predators were introduced after the X Factor event to create more food and suffering. As we suffer, we create more food for the parasites. It's my view that we're very vulnerable. We go outside and you watch these shows where they try to survive, and they're vulnerable. Their skin is getting eaten by insects and all this suffering. And it's my view this is all intentional, and all these things were introduced. So let's look at more of these. And there's a cow-headed humanoid. And then let's look at the size of these guns from the old world. And again, left over from the old world. And again, he's got the size, body style of the beings from the old world. Look at the size of the sword here. And the sword here. Built for big swords for bigger size people or beings. And again, it's my view that you have our size body style here was very prevalent, as well as was probably one of the most popular. Besides, this was the most, and this was probably the second most, but this was probably the most prevalent size in my view, this higher size than us by the windows and doors and so forth, and then us. And then, you have all different sizes, but probably a majority of them were looking about that size and our size. And again, another depiction. Everybody's probably seen this before. Look at the size of these beings compared to us. But it's in the old world, we had all different size beings. There were gentle giants, very intelligent, wise beings everywhere. Look at the size of these books. Look at the size of the guns. Big guns for bigger sized people. He's got the bigger size body style from the old world. Residual body style from the old world. Look at the size of this gentleman here. And here's us. Again, this is the size that walks in these doors. And these windows are built for. And these ceilings are built for these bigger gentlemen up here. From the old world. They have the old world Tatarian body style. They're not Tatarian. They're survivors of the survivors. But they still had the body style before it was wiped out, in my view. An agenda. There was an agenda by the Smithsonian to go around and collect anything from the old world and bury it under the Vatican, etc. In 1909, people found pyramids and buildings and they found mummies, all kinds of stuff that they said, oh, it looks like it's from the Oriental. But it's because it was a one world order and it was the same everywhere. There were pyramids everywhere. There were buildings with organs in them with healing frequencies everywhere. Look at the size of this guy. Look at the clothes that was already available. Because it was a highly advanced civilization. They had all this stuff already. And then we ended up inheriting all these buildings and all this stuff from the old world. Things that survived. Not everything died and was melted, because when you look at the major cities everywhere, these are all buildings that survived. They're mostly red brick, but in the more popular areas, the red brick's been updated and upgraded by the Tatarian concrete molds over the red brick. They drill holes into the red brick, dip a steel rod in some concrete, put it in the hole, and then attach the updated, upgraded Tatarian concrete molds piece by piece over the red brick. You see it everywhere in the cities. You had tall people, small people, what you would call dwarfs, not midgets. Dwarfs and fairies, very small. Small people, and look, skeleton of an old world size body style. Look at the size of some of these beings. Some of these humans from the old world. Again, look how small he is down here. Look how big he is up there. Look how big he is. That was a normal size. See the doorway here? See how it lets him in without having to duck. Look at the baby. He's bigger than this guy. And look how small these guys are down here. I mean, look how small they are. And again, there was an agenda to wipe out all body styles and vessels that did not look like the way we look now. Look at the size of these people down here in the door. And look at all the melted heat damage on the door here. And all these is concrete molds over the red brick. Highly advanced civilization. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Andre the Giant. I forgot his name. And look at the size of him. Look at that hand. Goodness gracious. Look at this guy. Huge. Huge. 3 huge gentlemen here, and then he's normal, our size here. But see, they were extremely athletic, it was their size, it was normal. Look at the size of this sword. But this guy, gentleman here on the left, he couldn't use that sword. It's built for this guy on the right. Gentleman on the right is huge. Look how big they are. Look how big this guy is. Look how big they are. Very, very big. Very big. Oh wow, look at this door here. And it looks like you could open it right here, down here. It looks like it opens. It looks like it opens right there. And look how tall these beings were compared to us. Look at the size of this door. It's enormous. It is enormous. And by the way, that's beautiful. Look at their architecture is gorgeous. It's glorious. And another victim. Look at the size of this Tatarian. Looks like it got in a fight with a snake. But this is all liquid hot melted building. And they were flooded in it and died. You have your different sized beings. Our size down here. And then the other size, and this guy's even bigger. Look how big they are. Big guns for big people, big doors and ceilings for big people. Look at the size of the door again. And here's us. And then look at the size of this guy. Boy, he's big. And look at the clothing. Just impeccable style. In the style of the old world. And again, look at this door. Look at the bike down here. And look at the door. It's enormous. It's enormous. This is how we know the size of these. Because you don't build doors this size unless there's people, a lot of people that size. Thank you for watching part 1 of the documentary, When the Buildings Cried. You have only completed 25% of this documentary. Please continue to part 2. The link for part 2 will be conveniently located in the description below. Just click on it to continue the documentary. Thank you.